right, welcome to the stage, Hamish Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Lucian. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Hamish Mackenzie. I am the host for today's session on which is titled From Data Overload to Actionable Insights, Mastering Data Management in Manufacturing. It's sponsored today by CrateDB, HiveByte, and HiveMQ. So first of all, it'd be great if you could just let us know where you are, who you are in the chat, give us a feel for who's joining us today. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to go through a couple of points of housekeeping. Those of you who've been here before will have heard me say this many times before. It's an hour-long session. We're going to be introducing the topic, our guests. Obviously, we have 4 guests today, which is great. And we will try and leave some time at the end for your questions. So please do get those questions coming in. Use the Q&A function within the platform. Don't put them in the chat. It just makes it a lot easier for us to find them, and it's also more likely that you'll get your question answered if you use the Q&A function. So please get them in there. Don't wait till the end. As soon as you have a question pop up in your head, get it in the Q&A tool, and we'll do our best to get to it at the end of the conversation. All right, so time to focus on the session. I think we all know that in today's manufacturing landscape, and indeed in a lot of other industries, a lot of other business sectors, there's lots of data. We've got no shortage of data, but it's sometimes difficult to get actionable insights out of that data. And this session is really going to delve into the challenges around that. So managing the vast amounts of data that manufacturers are collecting, and demonstrating how real-time analytics can transform that raw data into valuable insights. We're going to learn about modern data management solutions, how they enable manufacturers to optimize production, improve operational efficiency, and drive innovation. And we're going to look at harnessing data streams in real time to leveraging AI-powered analytics even. We're going to basically try and give you the tools you need to master the whole data management issue and be able to make faster, better, data-driven decisions. That's what we're aiming for. And we have 4 fantastic guests with us today to discuss this very key topic, I think you'll all agree. First up, we have John Harrison, who is Chief Product Officer at HiveByte. John has spent his 25-year career both delivering software to manufacturers and working for manufacturers in operations roles. Today, he is the co-founder and Chief Product Officer of HiveByte, where he's responsible for product management, customer success, partner success, and go-to-market strategy. And above all, John is passionate about delivering technology that really improves productivity and safety in manufacturing and industrial environments. So thank you for joining us again, John. Next, we have Ravi. Has Ravi made it yet? I know he's in travel, but if he's not here yet, he will be here shortly. He is Director of Industry Solutions Manufacturing at HiveMQ. He's a product management leader with extensive experience delivering high-quality products and services that have generated revenues and cost savings of over $10 billion for companies like Motorola, GE, Bosch, many others. He is in charge of evangelizing and enabling sales of the HiveMQ solution amongst manufacturing, energy, logistics, and industrial automation customers. And he's presented at many, many events in person and virtually over the past 2 years, quite a few of them with me, both online and in person. Hanover Messe, SPS, ICC, IIoT World, of course. The chances are if you're attending one of those events, Ravi will be there. So very pleased to have Ravi with us again. Next up, we have Brendan Conrad, who is a senior solution engineer at CrateDB. Brendan also has over 2 decades of technical leadership expertise. His focus is in application architecture, development, and technical sales, focusing on real-time analytics, digital transformation, and automation. And he designs and leads transformative solutions that optimize data pipelines, but also leveraging cutting-edge technologies for real-time decision-making, business intelligence, application architecture frameworks, and observability. And all his work is designed to help clients drive multi-million-dollar revenue growth, which is my favorite topic as well. Thank you very much for joining us, Brendan. Next, we have Brian Sakrasek, Smart Manufacturing Specialist Leader for Deloitte Consulting. Brian has 20 years of experience in manufacturing and heavy industry across engineering, project management, sales, leadership, and consulting. He describes himself as a lifelong learner and gets his energy from collaborating on his clients' most challenging, complex challenges even, helping them combine innovative technology with sustainable change. And today he focuses on helping his clients with challenges and opportunities around industrial analytics, data engineering, next-gen automation, advanced infrastructure, and cybersecurity across process, hybrid, and discrete industries. So thank you very much for joining us, Brian. And finally, a few words about me. Very definitely the least important person in the room, but I am your moderator for this session. My name's Hamish. I'm a former IDC analyst, a current IIoT World Advisory Board member, and I've been running my consulting practice here in Munich, Germany since 2006. I help small and mid-sized industrial software vendors dramatically increase their growth efficiency by working with them to optimize their go-to-market strategy. That's across sales, marketing, customer success, positioning, talent management, and productivity. And of course, I also moderate and MC sessions like this. If you'd like to know more about me and what I do, just look me up on LinkedIn, Hamish Mackenzie, Munich. There's only one of me. Shouldn't be too difficult to find me. So please ping me, connect with me. I'd love to connect with you as well. All right, quick reminder, get your questions into the Q&A function. Don't put them in the chat, otherwise we might not find them. And with that said, let's get into the discussion. Now, I always like to start these sessions with a bit of context. And so, John, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Why is better data management important?
Thanks, Hamish, and thank you for having me on this session. I think we have to take a step back and not so much think about data management, but what our business is trying to do today. Business is trying to be more effective, faster, more agile by leveraging data. Data is enabling them to compete and to succeed as businesses. And fundamentally, manufacturing is no different. Manufacturers are trying to leverage data to drive their business. And manufacturers do have a unique environment, which is a factory floor. And the factory floor in a manufacturing company is where they produce all their products, but it's also a massive creator of data. And so manufacturing companies have a unique environment where they don't have to collect data from humans, though there are some humans there that we do want to collect data from, but they get to collect data from machinery, from equipment, and they aggregate that into various different systems. And so we have this huge amount of data that we can use. And of course, if you're doing any sort of AI or machine learning or whatnot, large volumes of high quality data are critical. So the idea is we have this huge sea or this huge source of data. However, at the same time, there are a lot of surveys going on right now that are saying things like 84% of companies say data access is slowing them down. So we have all this data, but we don't have the data, or we don't have it in a usable format, where companies are trying to use machine learning, they're trying to use statistical processing, they're trying to use AI and Gen AI, but yet it's not scaling. It's not scaling. The data, in many cases, people are saying the data is not good. Well, is it not good or is it not usable? And so, and at the same time, we've got cloud costs. We can't just store all the data. We need to store the right data. We need to use the right data. So how do we keep track of our costs? How do we make data usable? And that's where we really see the challenge. The challenge isn't so much use cases. Every company that we talk to, at least, they have a lot of use cases where they'd like to use data. The challenge is the usability of the data, the agility of data, and the governance of the data. And that's where we have this. That's why data management is important, right? Mm-hmm. If we could do that, then if we get better usable data, highly agile data, and better governance, then we can start delivering on these use cases and driving more successful business.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for that context, John. Brendan, if I can come to you. So all this data comes in at lots of different formats, lots of different speeds. A lot of the time, which is part of the problem, it's sitting in silos, just like different departments within organizations tend to work in silos a lot as well, which is obviously not constructive and not conducive to growth. So from your perspective, what are some of the best practices around centralizing and harmonizing that data so it becomes easier to extract those actionable insights?
Yeah, great question. And Hamish, thank you for moderating this panel and for having me as a guest. And, I was listening to John's answer as well. And he's raising all of these great points that also kind of aligns with the issue of silos. It's something I've dealt with my whole career, where you have different data sources, different teams, different people, and there's ownership of the data, ownership of the process, and it's not necessarily a willingness or lack thereof to share the data. It's that we don't know how, and so this is where CrateDB can step in and help with that. And to talk about the specific practices, I kind of look at it in terms of like three different areas. There's consolidation of the data, and then an absolute requirement of schema flexibility. Just, we need a multi-model system, which CrateDB is. And then lastly, how do we get the data out? And how do we get it out fast? How do we make it actionable? And this is the real-time aspect that also CrateDB offers. And, when we're thinking about data sources too, in terms of silos, they come in as IoT streams, logging, CDC systems. I hate to say it, but teams are still using spreadsheets and running their analytics on that. And the thought is, well, if I have things in a spreadsheet, I can't connect it to the greater operational aspects and goals of the organization. So it's just stuck in a spreadsheet. And all of this is a real challenge to integrate. And you can think of CrateDB as your central hub for all of these formats. If you're thinking about like data as a fire hose, some data as waterfall, different diverse formats and speeds, and CrateDB is just a big funnel for all of this information, where it can come in structured, semi-structured, and it creates this unified repository without a lot of pre-processing. One of the great benefits of CrateDB is the schema leniency in its design. So you can have things like a spreadsheet export sitting right next to an IoT stream log, and everything comes into CrateDB with minimal effort and automatic indexing. So one of the things I talked about, schema flexibility that leads to real-time querying, is you need that automated indexing aspect, which CrateDB offers. So a lot of flexibility in terms of looking at the schema. For an example, we had, looking at IoT and manufacturing, we had a customer that was able to reduce downtime significantly because they use CrateDB to detect anomalies within their operation in real time. And it was interesting because it didn't require an overhaul. So when we talk about schema flexibility, this is one of the true benefits, is you're able to operationally adapt very quickly when you have the data in the right system.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And I think I've managed to get through 10 minutes without mentioning the AI term, but I think it's time. I think it's time we brought it into play. And obviously, everybody's talking about it, and the adoption is growing, even for applications like predictive maintenance, production optimization. So can you just talk a little bit about what role does a database play in terms of preparing, storing, and serving the data that's going to be needed for these AI models?
Yeah, I mean, nothing has really changed in terms of the database. It is still foundational to what you're doing. And I think that when we're looking at manufacturing, and really it's not really industry specific, but you're looking at a proper database to handle things from the past. You're looking at historical data. You obviously need it operationally for current pipelines and workflows. But now, how do we set up a system that's also forward thinking? How do we are we nimble enough and agile enough to be able to adapt to when a competitor has some sort of AI tool in the space, and then you feel, we're already behind, right? So the role that the database plays is it's still foundational, it's fundamental. With CrateDB, it aligns specifically with the requirements that an AI solution needs, which is clean data. You need it real time. You need it to be high quality. It needs to be something where the AI model can train on it, and then ultimately make decisions with this information very, very quickly. And not a lot of systems are equipped to handle that. And so the reaction is, now we need to overhaul everything that we do in order to make our operations AI ready. When you introduce CrateDB, you already have that. You're able to handle like massive amounts of historical logging. your operational queries, your day-to-day, and then also being able to bridge the gap to what your AI vision is with one system. So if you're thinking about IoT sensors, MQTT brokers, high byte pipelines, and other things that can transform all of this information into AI-ready formats, CrateDB offers high-speed ingestion, so we can take all of this information into a schema flexible system, and then align it with things that AI needs, which is storing embeddings, performing hybrid search, sub-second response times, and everything that AI systems need in terms of not necessarily boilerplate, but the typical fundamentals for AI-driven queries. You're able to do that in one system with CrateDB. And just a quick example, if you're thinking about like predictive maintenance, right? That this is something I think that we're all kind of thinking about is how do I make sure that my system is maintainable? We don't have things breaking down without our knowledge. How do we, forecast potential replacements of hardware and things like that? And this is where you can empower an AI-driven system to look at anomaly detection, look at trends, how fast are things operating, when are slowdowns occurring, and things like that. And so you need to have your data accessible, reliable, and CrateDB lets the AI focus on generating this and actually coming up with actionable insights and the outcomes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. All right. So the other aspect to this, which is very high profile also within this event, is kind of what I always refer to as the OT-IT divide. Ideally, there wouldn't be a divide, but I think in a lot of circumstances there is. And I wanted to come to Ravi now. Could you just talk? We're going to talk a little in more detail about MQTT later, but could you just explain at a high level what is the role of an MQTT broker when it comes to enabling the seamless movement of IoT data all the way from OT into IT systems? In the context of trying to enable a digital transformation.
Yeah, Hamish, thank you. And sorry, I was a little late joining the meeting as well. So thank you again for having me here. So MQTT is basically a publish subscribe protocol, right? A messaging protocol that makes it efficient to move the data from OT systems to IT systems. And it's very lightweight. The packet size is very, very small. So it's very proven from that perspective. So all of the things that Brendan was talking about and all of the things that John was talking about needs kind of like that data movement, the data consolidation from all of your different OT systems, say machines, if you will, that are generating the data, maybe some databases, local databases that are storing some data, some CMMS systems or MES systems that have like some piece of this big puzzle that you have to that has to come together for you to create your advanced analytics or create like use it for in other application use cases. That's what MQTT is enabling. It's enabling like various clients that have information to publish to be able to send that information to the broker, and then the broker then brokering that information over to other clients that require that information in real time. And on top of that, HiveMQ has made it like highly scalable and highly reliable to make sure that that information is not lost because, hey, your connection is lost, or you have way too many connections and packets are dropping and things like that. So enterprise brokers go into a little bit more detail than just what the protocol is providing as well, Hamish.
Okay, thank you. And what about in terms of the data architecture? What are some of the other considerations that need to be factored in there in terms of an effective IoT system?
Yeah, to me, it's like, the MQTT broker is kind of like central to the architecture, but you need to do things obviously to the left and to the right, obviously, right? So you need, and John also touched upon a lot of these things, so I'm going to be regurgitating it. So it's like you need to create some edge gateways or some modules that are able to go to the source of the data and collect it. Like, and the data is in like different formats, right? Like even machine data. PLCs have data, various PLCs have data in different formats, like Ethernet IP or Rockwell PLCs. They have different formats. And sensor data is in some formats. So how can you convert the data and bring it in a format that is like understandable by the rest of the architectural layers, if you will, or the IP layers? The data packets, like JSON is the most understood data format, if you will. But data is in like other formats. How do you make sure that it is brought in a format where it's understood by others? Tags that are coming in from, say, PLCs and others, they have a particular structure. How do you ensure that you bring it and other systems can recognize those tags and use those tags to drive information out. So those are the kinds of things that you need to do. So you need to have some edge gateways that do the consolidation, and that does some of the data manipulation, like I think Brendan mentioned about like predictive maintenance right at the source. So potentially like do some of those applications, and then the outcomes of those are the ones that you want to bring into your enterprise systems, because not all data needs to go to enterprise or to the cloud, right? Only specific data that is things that the customer or the enterprise really wants, you need to bring in, because obviously cloud ingest costs are high. So why bring in all the data and like just dump it into like a data lake if you don't really want it? So bring in the right data, and that's kind of like what the architecture is. It's about like ensuring that you're able to go to the source with the data, bring in the data, cleanse it, normalize it, and then keep doing that as you go up the layer until you get to the enterprise where all the data is consolidated. And then I think we probably can talk about the unified namespace, which is kind of like how you create a single source of truth. And like what John's team does is a lot of that, ensuring that you contextualize the data, and then that contextualized data can then be kind of like married with an MQTT broker, for example, or other methods to kind of like store that unified namespace, so that you can then enable advanced applications like AI, ML, and predictive maintenance and things like that.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna get into unified namespace a little bit later. Before we do that, we want to talk a bit about some of the challenges around all of these subjects. But before we do that, I want to ask Brian about that as well. But first of all, Brian, I want to come to you, and could you kind of paint from the obviously the external consulting perspective, you have a much broader view, I guess, on all of these topics. So first of all, how do you see the future of data-driven decision-making within manufacturing using some of these technologies that we're talking about? And second of all, what, in your view, is keeping manufacturers from moving faster or more effectively towards that golden future of data-driven decision-making?
Right. And thanks, Hamish, for having me. I'm excited to be with this team on this panel today. It's a very top of mind topic for me and my clients. So, I think, John started to talk about all of this data that we get off of our machines. I think fully realized the value that data has in our manufacturing environments is really in the people. The people don't go away. It's all about enabling the people to either do higher value tasks or to make those decisions more effectively and more efficiently. We talk a lot about OEE as a metric in manufacturing, right? How do we keep our machines available with high yield and high quality? But one of the things that I consistently see when I go in with our manufacturers is their workers at all levels are highly inefficient. And a lot of this has to do with the lack of data that's available to them. You see frontline workers making machine settings based on tribal knowledge that may or may not be the right decision. You see frontline supervisors having to deal with that last mile, last shift dynamic scheduling challenge, right? Where they have real-time constraints around labor and material availability. You see, more regional resources that have to make comparisons across different sites to do that. And so all of this data probably exists somewhere, right? It's coming off the machines, it's coming off the transactional systems, but we talk about how do we collect it, how do we make it available to those humans. Like, to me, that is the future of manufacturing, right? Moving that, in some of the surveys that we've seen, some data analysts, folks that work in process engineering roles, they're spending 70% of their time searching for, manipulating, transforming data just to get to that analysis and decision point. Frontline workers, I'm working with a large defense contractor, and their welders are spending 80% of their time preparing and understanding the work they need to do, and only 20% of time with their helmet down and actually, welding material. Okay. These are like really real challenges. And so if we can pull the data forward to make sure that folks are doing their best work in the right way, that's the solution. And we'll keep talking about AI, we'll keep talking about analytics and enterprise reporting. But there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that exists here that affects a very large number of people that are out there. And so, I think, to me, and what I see, inside of Deloitte and our clients is how do we get the best out of our people as well as our process, and that's going to drive the business forward, on the back end of that high value, well managed data.
You talked a lot about the kind of the human aspect there, and is there anything else from that perspective that is stopping manufacturers, pursuing this approach more aggressively? Is it because, for example, that it's difficult to get management buy-in, or it's difficult to prove the ROI? Any other obstacles around that?
Yeah, so ROI is always a popular one. I think the classic way that equipment shows up in a manufacturing facility is with a capital project. Capital project will bring in equipment, it'll bring in software systems and control, it'll require certain integrations to existing systems. And so a lot of times these things are done at a point in time with a point-to-point type of connection. And folks are looking for, ROI, whether it's a 12-month ROI or an 18-month ROI. They want to see that payback. Some of the things we're talking about here only provide value at a certain scale and show up as a foundation enabler, right? If I only need to connect two systems, the straight line is the direct path, right? But if I subscribe to the fact that the data that I create, the insights that I will sort of generate, put that back into the system so that I can leverage for future use cases, or to make additional use cases more simple to implement or easier to implement, that's where the value starts ratcheting up. So, I personally am seeing a shift here, right? Where folks are starting to see, they've sort of, they've gotten their lumps over the last 10 years of Industry 4.0 and saying, there has to be a better way. And what is that? It's the data foundation is an absolute essential piece where, that is par for the course, right? To go ahead and execute a roadmap of capability across multiple years.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Thank you. So, John, it's time for me to ask you another very simple question. for a simple-minded person like me, non-technical expert, why is this so hard to get all this, to get the right data? We have ERP data, we have MES data, CMMS systems. Why can't we just use that?
Yeah, great question, Hamish. And there is some data, and there's some data that's very usable in the MES system, in the ERP system, in the CMMS system. But what people are finding is the questions that they're answering now need to go a level deeper, and so they need to go into the telemetry data on the factory floor to get that level deeper. So an MES system or even a quality management system wasn't put in place to actually do, quality troubleshooting. It was put in place to record quality events. Similarly, a CMMS system wasn't put in place to do predictive asset maintenance. It was put in place to log asset work orders. And so we need to get down into the devices to get access to that data. And of course, that's where the challenges that I think Ravi had talked about, that Brian had talked about earlier, is how do we get access to that? Another thing that we're seeing in our, the irony is that some of these new systems that people are implementing for Industry 4.0 around collaborative robots, around additive manufacturing, around AGVs, automated guided vehicles, they actually have come with their own control system. And so now factories have another control system that they need to work with. And what they really want is to be able to aggregate all this data together. So there have been these great projects, but it's actually created more silos. And the key is, how do we break them down? And we really need to break them down leveraging the telemetry data and pulling data from different systems together. It's when you can aggregate some of the information out of the ERP system, like what is the order details, with when we produce that item, what did we record in the MES system, with what did we actually record off the factory floor that we can drive real value for the operators, or even for the quality engineers, the asset maintenance engineers who are trying to do their jobs more efficiently. Okay, fantastic. And I think kind of associated with that is another buzzword, I guess, or it's not just a buzzword. It's a real critical issue around technical debt, and factories with a lot of very old
technology, right? I was actually shocked to understand that in some cases there's equipment used that's been used literally for decades and decades, still there, right? So Brian, if I could ask you first, what about if you're an organization in that situation, they want to improve their data management, but they're dealing with all this very, very old technology, old equipment. Maybe they don't have a lot of telemetry, or they don't have a lot of sensors around there in various parts of this infrastructure. What do you do then?
So I think, certainly if you don't have the data, there is the opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity to add additional sensors, to add secondary observations. Vision cameras are a popular solution in a lot of places to extract data using vision. What I think about with technical debt is I think the first thing that manufacturers need to just sort of look in the mirror and accept the fact that there's a lot of it, right? There's a very messy landscape that's out there, and going back and fixing the decades of technical debt there and the rigidity is not something that's going to happen overnight, right? There should be a plan in place, but what I like about sort of where we are today, kind of moving into 2025, is a lot of the technology vendors in the space have come up with solutions to combat that, right? We used to have to be super rigid with how we integrate with systems, and maybe it was a off-the-shelf system that was configurable. Now there are many more additional solutions, much like in the IT space, where you sort of have these different, I would call them more modular solutions that you can abstract away that integration layer, right? And that doesn't remove the technical debt that exists, but it helps you deal with it. And I think probably if I had a recommendation, there's probably a two-parter, right? One is start small, work with some of these technologies. Most of these are available in free or very reduced trials. Narrow that scope as tight as you need to so that you just understand what it does and how it might add value. And then build that plan. What is that plan of what are the set of use cases, and what are the different things you might go attack with this? And that's going to help you build not only the sort of the ROI justification of moving to some of these platforms, but also it'll help you understand what's the tech debt that we can live with, what's the tech debt that we need to prioritize to remediate, and what are the things that we truly need to overhaul because it's really holding our business back.
All right, thank you for that, Brian. I think, Brendan, do you have some experience of this situation as well with your clients?
Yes, and I pretty much am in alignment with Brian's sentiments. Part of my background is software development. So when he's talking about modularizing or looking for ways to find small elements of your workflow to potentially modularize and replace, or potentially looking at layering, as Brian brought up a couple of great examples, vision cameras and things like that, where it's not necessarily a replacement of something, but you're now adding some modern layers to your existing workflows and operations. You could hear that and say, well, aren't we just adding more technical debt then over time? We're layering and we're building things. And while it may seem that way, and I think that that's part of that hesitation to really make a significant change, there can be actual real-time outcomes from some of these changes that can start to get you to think about the art of what's possible instead of impossible. A quick example just would be like a real-time dashboard. So one specific team is maybe fearful or doesn't want to admit that they do not have proper insights about this particular phase of the operation. Maybe they have some logging analysis that they do. I'll keep bringing up spreadsheets. They're doing something somewhat archaic. Maybe their process is a little hidden. Thinking about transforming that into something visual that everybody can see. We have all of these great monitoring options, but we talk about the data being siloed and this or that. So if you're bringing all of this data into CreateDB and we can build a real-time dashboard on top of that data, now we're starting to think about how do we want to take action on this information that we have. And it might feel like taking a step back in terms of technical debt to take a few steps forward. But there is a layering approach to this that would also work. And lastly, I would say too, when we're thinking about bringing in an additional database like CrateDB, it doesn't have to work as a replacement. And I think that that's part of what technology professionals think about is how do we want to take this legacy database or legacy system, and what is the level of effort to do a replacement? Well, the level of effort is too high. We're not going to do it. We'll reevaluate in 3 years, and then 30 years later, we're still doing the same thing. You can think about a system like CrateDB as a real-time companion for your operations. And I think that that's something that is, it's not necessarily a new idea, but I don't think everyone is thinking about databases in that way, where you can really have it not necessarily off to the side, fully integrated with your organization, but performing things that your legacy systems can't. So now you've introduced this new companion that is really helping and aiding these older systems, and taking the effort and the workload off of them to perform more real-time analytics that you could on top of CrateDB.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
Hamish,
what
if I can just quickly add, right? I mean, at the end of the day, to me, it's all about the people, process, and then the technology, right? I mean, obviously, whatever technology we put in place and all the technical debt we're talking about is if we can align that to like what the people that are going to be using that and the process that or the outcomes that we want to get, I think the technical debt is the right thing to do, right? And then because it is actually getting you to where you want to go, and it will also promote more adoption. It will give you more ROI because you are actually aligning it to your goals at the end of the day.
Okay, and I want, because you mentioned the integration a minute ago, Brendan, I want to come back to talk about how what that looks like in terms of the integration between how it works together, right? The database, the data integration platform, and the message broker. What that whole kind of interplay looks like. But before we do that, I want to just come back to the IoT data topic, which we touched on before in terms of MQTT. So Ravi, why do you think that MQTT is kind of more or less becoming the de facto standard when it comes to moving this data?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, there's a lot of data formats that are available. I mean, obviously on the factory floor, from machine to machine, you have OPC UA, you have Modbus, various other formats. But when it comes to bringing the data to the enterprise, you need like something that's lightweight, that's event-driven, that is publish subscribe. So to optimize your bandwidth, which is already kind of like limited, connectivity, which is somewhat limited because you want to use your core connectivity for your factory operations and not like tax that with moving data, right? And so that's why I think MQTT as a protocol is becoming pretty popular and almost a de facto standard when it comes to moving data from edge to enterprise or prem to enterprise because of its lightweight nature, because of the fact that it's event-driven, exception-driven, small packet size. It has like quality of service built into it, meaning like you can have message guarantees on MQTT. So that talks reliability. Some security features built into it, which is optional. Obviously, you need to implement it, but a lot of the things have been already worked out. And also, like when you are in the MQTT ecosystem, unlike some other ecosystems where you can have variants of it, the interoperability is fairly straightforward, right? I mean, anybody that has a client should be able to work with a broker that is implementing MQTT either 3.1.1 or MQTT 5, which adds additional features. So it's pretty well regimented. And that's why it's gaining a lot of popularity in the IIoT area.
Okay. And John, I mean, how does a data ops platform kind of interplay with the MQTT side of things to create this kind of single source of data for the enterprise? Can you just in terms of the unified namespace is what I'm basically talking about?
Happy to talk to that. And Brian started down that path when he was talking about an abstraction, right? And Brendan kind of talked about, one of the challenges with all these legacy systems, as well as like all the spreadsheets and all the stuff that's not in the stack, And what, people say, oh, we don't want to add another layer. Well, the reality is you have many layers. This is really bringing them together. So what DataOps does is it says, okay, in the past, we would just point-to-point connect things. What we need to do is think of data movement as more of a discipline and a holistic view within our company. If we only have two systems, it's easy to just point-to-point connect them. But when we have the number of sources and the number of target systems that we have today and that we're going to in the future, then utilizing data ops practices, utilizing solutions that are focused on standardizing, normalizing, contextualizing data, and then utilizing technology like MQTT as a way of moving that data throughout the enterprise, moving it to the cloud, making it readily available. Because MQTT, the beauty of MQTT is you can have multiple publishers and you can have multiple subscribers to that data. And you now have this data library that anyone who has access to the broker can go in and get access to. And that's the beauty of a UNS. A UNS is a unified namespace. It's just saying we're going to standardize, contextualize, organize data in a fashion that anyone in the company could go look at, and it's data that's logically organized. And where people need to understand is without a UNS, what is the challenge, right? The challenge is you go into the MES system, which we've already established doesn't have all the data that we need, but you start looking at tables and they're all cryptically named and the data is cryptically stored and you don't know where to find the data and how to get access to the data. And by the way, it's going to take you 3 months to ask IT to get you a report because they have a lot of other projects they have going on. And so to get quick access to data takes a long time and is really hard and takes a lot of resource. With a unified namespace, and in fact, Brian and Ravi, so Deloitte, Hive, and HiveBuy worked on a project recently where the company was able to the users were able to rapidly get access to data that they needed quickly. And because one of the challenges of data today is what I need today is different than what I need tomorrow and is different than what I needed yesterday. And so how do I go in to a system, quickly find the data that I need today, work with that data, pull it into a database, pull it into Crate, pull it into whatever, work with it, and then move on. And that's where approaches like data ops, where you're standardizing, contextualizing data, you're building this practice within your enterprise for moving and securing data, and leveraging these different technologies have just accelerated our customers, not only to deploy it within a single site, but to deploy it across many, many sites. So it's really exciting, but you need to put some practices behind it. You can't have every developer doing whatever, independently connecting systems anymore. We need to build some data strategy and some data ops practices within our enterprises.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, and it's interesting you just said about what we needed yesterday isn't the same as what we needed today and what we may need tomorrow. And just one small point kind of aligned with that, I wanted to just ask Brendan in terms of sometimes new questions come up that you maybe haven't asked before in relation to this data. So how do you create one of these solutions using all these different components which allows for that kind of flexibility?
Yeah, I mean, flexibility is the key, right? I mean, and I had mentioned it before too, it's really hard to live in all three phases of time. And you need to think about that with a modern solution that offers that level of flexibility. And what do we mean by flexibility? Some of it really has to do with the types of data, the schema lenient architecture, having a system that can handle things. You can start to look in how we're going to architect this, looking at from the message broker integration platform. I love when John said get it into a database, because yes, the Crate would be that database, and that database has to be able to handle the data in and the data out. CrateDB is a multi-model database, so that is something that really has to be thought of when you're looking at a solution to handle this sort of pipeline. To offer this level of flexibility, it has to be flexible in nature. And so when you're thinking about maybe something like a sensor logging system, right? So that sensor logging system, yesterday it was all exporting to CSV because people were importing this into Excel and working on it there. And the sensor system was replaced or upgraded, and all of a sudden now it's creating JSON data. Just as a really crude example. CrateDB has flexible high-speed ingest where we can import any data type, CSV, JSON, and it doesn't require this massive schema overhaul. It doesn't require re-indexing of systems and manual hiring people to monitor and manage these indexes. So this flexible nature in terms of the architecture, but also the automation that it provides on its own, that should also alleviate some of the fears when we kind of think about what we were talking about earlier with technical debt and replacement and layering and things like that, is that you're also not adding IT and other technical overhead to your pipeline. So this automated indexing allows you to run ad hoc queries. And we're talking about a dashboard, of having these really visualized insights and things like that. Well, that's just a front end for a bunch of ad hoc queries because somebody decided to say, I would love to see, a 7-day time series chart of some sort. And it's a very easy and flexible model to be able to come in and write this query where you have CSV, JSON, logging information, CDC streams, things that were kicked off with a message broker, and all of this data harmoniously living together in a centralized system. You start to kind of unlock these possibilities that were impossible before because you have this flexible architecture.
Okay, fantastic. All right, I need to move it on because we're rapidly running out of time. It's a very rich subject. I knew this would be the case, but I do want to try and at least get to a couple of questions at the end. So I want to move on now to talk about some more practical steps. Okay, so you're an organization, you want to get started with all this stuff, but you're not necessarily sure how to do that, and also in terms of the alignment between the technical side, but also the business outcomes that it's meant to realize. Okay, so Brian, I wanted to come to you and ask, from your perspective, how should companies be shifting their tech stacks in relation to data management? How should they be perhaps evaluating their IIoT teams? And also, what's the best way for them to align these data management strategies with the business outcomes that they're actually looking to achieve, which ultimately is the purpose of all of this stuff, right?
Well, I mean, that was a big ask here in a short amount of time that you
Brian is going to solve all the problems just right.
I didn't say it was going to be easy.
He's a consultant.
Yeah, maybe I'll kind of give like a top three. I think
high level answer. Yeah, that would be great.
From a technology perspective, really moving back from an architectural approach can be really helpful from an overall governance perspective. I think if you think about what is the overall architecture that fits the organization, right, and then what are the patterns that we can sort of deploy for different types of use cases, that also just drives better reuse and better governance and standards around how things get stood up. And so, when John talked about the sort of one-off or the developers doing what is in their minds probably the right decision, having good governance around architectural strategy and tech platform strategy can save you a lot of those missteps. I would also point to, we shouldn't ignore the benefits of striving towards standardization where it makes sense, right? Like that was sort of the old paradigm, like let's try to standardize everything. That's obviously not realistic, but let's have some standards. Let's have things that we know are mandatory, have things that we know are acceptable or preferred. And kind of manage and control what we can control, I think would be very helpful. I think the last piece here around, thinking around, how do we drive the business is to make sure that we continue to work towards understanding how data is the foundation of a lot of the things that we want to do, right? If we want to capture that value, we know that there's going to be a lot of opportunity with a limited amount of resources. And that value only comes at scale. And so while we want to test and start small and pilot to understand and understand like what can happen and maybe validate some of the, the value that's coming out of that, we know that we need to build on scalable platforms to achieve, the work here, right? And so I would say like really get tight on that connectivity between the business's ambition and the business's roadmap and the feasibility of scale, and do you have the right enabling functions to make it happen? So those are my three.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much for that, Brian. Message brokers, Ravi, just also to get practical for a second, I'm sure people are probably, they're aware of enterprise brokers, they're aware of open source brokers, they don't necessarily know what the relative role of those is in this digital transformation use case within manufacturing. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, look, I mean, Brian actually alluded to it, right? When you start off on a POC, right, you want to look at like open source software, which is kind of like free of charge for you to just try it within your the confines of what you're trying to do. Obviously, aligning it to your people, aligning it to your process so that you can ensure that you have the proper ROI from that technology. But the open source software has limitations in terms of like the number of connections, for example, right? Because in the real world, you want to actually scale up to thousands and like millions of connections ultimately, right? Or you want high scalability. You want the ability to have like full support for your product, if you will, right? You want to build extensions to other systems. You want that robust unified namespace that can like be highly scalable, highly reliable, and secure, because somebody brought up security, right? That's a big part of it. This is where I think the enterprise brokers come in, where like HiveMQ, we obviously have an open source, but we also have an enterprise offering, which builds on the open source, which adheres to MQTT open source software, but has built a lot more value add features that are needed for manufacturing or industrial use cases. If you have if you have a downtime event, right, what does that cost for your manufacturing, right? I mean, like if you're not able to do that, are you okay with like waiting for an hour for you to come back, or you're not? If you're not, then that's kind of like where you need that high availability features that we offer with our clustering technology, if you will, right? To ensure that if systems go down, and systems go down, how can you retrieve yourself quickly so that you don't have any blip in your business processes, and you can continue to do what you do without having a big impact? These are the things where enterprise brokers also really come into play. And slowly but surely, the role of the brokers are starting to expand. It's starting to get more on the edge side of things as well, because you want to go to the source of data, make sure that you could curate it and collect it before you even bring it to the enterprise. And that is a major aspect of what we do. And also like and cleansing of the data to make sure that it is the right quality, it's in the right format, it's normalized, and it's available for data ops platforms like Highbyte and others, if you will, right? And then like on the right side, it's all about connecting it to the right applications, whether they support MQTT or not. We have built in some what we call SDKs that allow you to have these application plugins that connect to, say, Kafka platform for doing streaming analytics, or any of the like AWS, Azure, or other hyperscalers or databases like Crate database and others, if you will, for specific applications. So acting as that like faucet in the middle, right, that allows you to connect from the sources to the things in a scalable manner is what we really do.
Okay. Well, if I had to pick one topic which has just come up now again and again and again today, in particular, it's ROI.
Yep.
So I just wanted to ask John finally, could you maybe give us some examples of that you're seeing, and maybe help people understand how they can, especially if they need to try and sell internally, as in why we should make this investment. Just give us some examples from your world.
Yeah. What we hear from customers is a lot of times they'll start a project, they'll go out, they'll determine that they can actually get value out of the data. But then when they look at the cost of that, of rolling that out within a single plant and rolling it out across multiple plants, the approach that they took during that proof of concept, it doesn't scale. And so the value and the ROI of doing what Brian was explaining around governance and scalability and leveraging things like MQTT and HighByte as a data ops platform is that you're able to scale things so much faster, and you're able to do it with less resource. And so, we hear people talking about the ROI that they achieved is they were able to scale things 10 times faster than their previous approach. And so, the previous approach may have been some custom coding. I've got 2 different systems. I need to move the data. They're able to go 10 times faster, which means that they can, oftentimes, it's not that they're going to cut people. It means that they can get 10 times more projects completed.
Right.
In fact, Brian and Ravi and I worked on a project, or one of Brian's customers, our customers, where they were able to scale across 30 plants in 2 months.
Yep. And
those are the sort of speed and scalability that you can achieve by leveraging low-code to no-code solutions, leveraging these new architectures that we've got in place today that weren't in place and weren't available 10 and 15 and 20 years ago. And it just allows you to be so much more agile and so much more dynamic. So, we hear about going 10x faster. We hear about being able to go across sites and across multiple sites very quickly. Now you've got a platform that you can really quickly adjust to what your data needs are. So when people talk about ROI, they need to have that view of, it's not just about a single asset predictive maintenance. It's about all of my assets. It's about all of my data needs, and how do I execute that with a smaller team? Because the biggest bottleneck today that I see of getting those operators access to that data is the OT and IT teams, because they've got 1,000 projects that they'd like to do and that people are asking them to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these can be translated to like actual tangible ROIs as well, right? Like cost savings, right? Using these technologies, how can you achieve, say, like, I don't know, $10 million cost savings per year? I mean, obviously, like, it's not just about technology, but it's also adding the process and the people to it. It's a combination of all of that, but it is obviously easy to derive some of those ROIs as well.
Fantastic. And that, you just mentioned IT and OT, and that's a fantastic segue into a question we've had from Prasad, who says one of the biggest challenges in organizations is who should lead the digital transformation? Is it IT or is it OT? So who would like to tackle that one?
That's usually a combination of IT and OT, in my opinion, right? I mean, there's always that, we are the IT, we'll kind of like do that. We are the OT, we know the OT systems, but the best practice, in my opinion, what we've seen is like a combination, because each party has something to bring to the table here, and a combination of the team that comprises of like the best of both worlds is the ideal way to do it. Now, are companies there? Probably not, right? I mean, again, some are more like IT oriented, some are more OT oriented. I think that divide is coming together, or at least it's getting overcome, but that's a slow process.
But the buck has to stop somewhere, though, right?
Yes, the buck has to stop.
Is there someone who, Brian, have you got a view on that?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple anecdotes. And I think I do have a perspective. I do think it needs to be a dedicated team that has transformation as their focus. Yep. That tends to be where it stops. A lot of times, if you make it business driven or IT driven or ops driven, there's an imbalance in achieving the value and getting the right collaboration and share that happens. So there's probably a dedicated team that's a blend, that comes together to drive that transformation, working with their counterparts. I'll give you 2 client sort of anecdotes just to maybe laugh at a little bit. One was, we always see this IT/OT written everywhere. And he asked me, he's a VP of engineering and automation. He said, "Can you write IT and OT?" He's like, we're going to work on these things for a very long time, but we'll never be the same team. So please just continue to call us separate people. Okay. Another example, maybe just for fun, is we did a large org model evaluation of, it was really focused around OT. How do OT folks, work together across a global organization? And they had a lot of IT interactions. And they actually dubbed their team, instead of calling them manufacturing IT or ops IT, they called them IT for OT. And I like that. Like, I sort of resonated with, like, you know, it was like IT in service of OT. To me, that sort of resonated with, I think, as a manufacturer, where's the heart of the business, right? It's making the products, it's keeping the lights on, it's having high yield and putting things out the door. So I like the IT for OT. We'll see if it you know, takes off after this podcast. So.
Yeah, I definitely haven't heard that one before. Okay, that's interesting. All right, one more. Just because we haven't really touched, or I haven't touched on this topic, even though it's come up a few times today. And I hope they get this pronunciation halfway right. Oceana. Give us your opinion on the use of blockchain in this context. And I know that's a bit of a vague question, but like in terms of your expertise, where does blockchain fit into this, if at all? Maybe Brendan, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's another source, right? It's another data source. Being able to act on it. In my experience, blockchain has some very consistent properties to it, and so part of what it requires is extremely fast queries, the ability to aggregate vast amounts of information, blockchain data. So in terms of, first of all, just getting the data in and being able to operate on it, you absolutely need a system like CrateDB if you're going to introduce blockchain into your pipeline in order to work with it, because you will very quickly get overwhelmed with the vast amounts of transactional data that comes in. But there's no reason why it can't come in and sit alongside other information and be able to marry it and query it appropriately.
I think the challenge with blockchain is you have to identify what the use case is. Blockchain is another technology, but you need to get really specific about the use case of where you're using it.
Yeah.
And there are some valid use cases, but to use blockchain on everything will not work, and you need to be really specific about it. So I'll be honest, I haven't heard, when talking with manufacturers, heard anyone mention blockchain to me in the last 5 years.
Wow.
But,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about anyone else. If any of you other guys hear it, I never hear, when we get into the guts of trying to move data in a factory, no one's thinking blockchain. Probably when you go across the supply chain is more blockchain.
I think it's more of ancillary use case. For example, I think somebody brought up security and cybersecurity. I mean, there are use cases where you can incorporate blockchain into that whole cyber security, ensuring that you had the different blocks are secured and things like that. It hasn't come across. I agree with John. I haven't come across that, but that does not mean it won't come up in the future. Because as systems are getting more complicated, you need to use these technologies to your advantage.
Fantastic, guys. Unfortunately, we are out of time. To those of you who didn't get your question answered, we will get answers to you after the event via email. So don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you. We just unfortunately ran out of time. Thank you to our panelists for your great insights. Thank you again to the sponsors, CrateDB, HiByte, HiveMQ. It's been great. We can't do these events without you, so thank you. And it's now time to move into today's final session, the current state and capabilities of real-time IIoT platforms. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Hamish. See you later.
Thank you.
Great talking with everyone. Bye now.
Bye now.
Thank you.